The sun hadn't even finished rising when Karen Witherspoon arrived, clipboard in hand, standing squarely in the middle of our new driveway like she owned it. My father, Raj D'Souza, squinted at her through the windshield as he turned off the ignition. We haven't even unpacked the boxes and we're already getting a visit. Mom Lena sighed beside him. HOA president. I bet she was right. Karen approached with a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind of smile that always precedes a warning or a threat. Her heels clicked against the pavement with military precision. She wore a pastel pantsuit, pearl earrings, and a gold-plated name tag that screamed authority complex. Welcome to Magnolia Crest, she said in a voice that dripped with faux hospitality. I'm Karen Witherspoon, president of the Homeowners Association. I like to meet all new residents personally, just to make sure everything starts off on the right foot. My brother Arjun, who was unloading the U-Haul with me, whispered under his breath. Translation: obey or be evicted. Karen's eyes flicked to him, sharp as a hawk. You must be the son, she said with a tight grin. Let's make sure you know no street parking after 9 p.m., no visible sports equipment, and no backyard structures without board approval. Oh, and of course all porch furniture must be in earth tones only. Mom nodded politely. Thanks. We'll review the guidelines. Karen took a sharp breath. Oh, and I did notice something during my morning inspection. Your grandmother's rose bushes. They're not compliant. We discourage anything with thorns in front yards. I stepped forward. You mean the roses we planted yesterday evening, before we even got the keys? Karen's expression didn't waver. Yes, I flagged them for removal. Safety hazard. There was a long silence. My father offered a calm smile to calm. Appreciate the heads up. We'll look into it. Karen paused, as if waiting for us to argue. When we didn't, she nodded crisply and walked away like a general after delivering marching orders. The moment she turned the corner, Mom muttered, I knew this HOA had rules, but I didn't expect a dictatorship. Dad exhaled through his nose. She's running this place like a courtroom where only she gets to speak. She doesn't know who she's dealing with, I said. And that was the crux of it to Karen. We probably looked like an ordinary suburban family trying to make a quiet life in a fancy neighborhood. What she didn't realize was that the D'Souza family was practically a law firm in disguise. Dad had practiced civil rights litigation for over 25 years. Mom specialized in property and zoning law. I'd just passed the bar and focused on family law, while Arjun and Meena, our youngest siblings, were both enrolled in law school. We weren't just book smart. We knew how power worked, and more importantly, we knew how to dismantle it. At first we tried diplomacy. We attended HOA meetings. We volunteered for the landscaping committee. We offered suggestions, small respectful ones, about amending outdated regulations, but every proposal was shut down by Karen, often with a smirk and a passive-aggressive compliment that's adorable. Lena, but we've been running things just fine before you got here. Soon she began issuing citations weekly. A soccer ball left on the grass. $50 fine. Grandma's sorry drying on the balcony. Visual pollution. My sister Mina's pride flag in her window. To political. The final insult came when a neighbor dropped by to chat with my uncle during an evening walk, and Karen issued a formal violation for an unauthorized curbside gathering. That was when we realized this wasn't just micromanagement. This was targeted harassment. She's banking on intimidation, Dad said one night over dinner. She thinks most people don't know the law, so they won't question her authority. She's not wrong, I replied. But in this case, she messed with the wrong family. We didn't fight back right away. We watched documented, quietly pulled by cross-referenced state statutes. We began building a case not for a courtroom yet, but for leverage. But Karen, drunk on her own authority, couldn't help herself. The tipping point came a few days later when she stood in our driveway again, this time flanked by 2 uniformed officers. My dad was in the middle of grilling lamb skewers in the backyard. Mena was stringing up fairy lights on the porch. We hadn't done anything wrong, but Karen, with a satisfied smirk and her phone still warm from dialing 911, declared we had violated HOA fire codes and implied we might not even be here. Legally, that was her final mistake. She didn't know we had prepared for this moment. She didn't know that everything she'd done was now a legally admissible paper trail, and she definitely didn't know that by calling the cops, she'd just handed us the perfect opportunity to strike. The sirens cut through the quiet hum of Saturday afternoon like a knife from the back deck, the scent of grilled lamb still lingering in the air. We watched 2 police cruisers roll slowly into the cul-de-sac, their presence as subtle as a wrecking ball. My father, still holding the tongs, gave a quiet sigh. Mena turned off the string lights she'd just hung. Grandma clutched her shawl tighter. Karen stood at the curb, chin high, practically glowing. She'd summoned law enforcement like a queen calling in her knights. Her phone still dangled from her manicured hand, screen unlocked on the HOA emergency line. And though she didn't speak right away, her smug smile said everything. Checkmate. Officers stepped out, one younger and uncertain, the other older and clearly weary. They surveyed the scene. A peaceful backyard gathering. A few skewers sizzling on the grill. Wind chimes tinkling faintly in the breeze. "Good afternoon," the older officer said, approaching with cautious professionalism. "We received a call about a possible code violation in an ongoing neighbor dispute." Dad placed the tongs carefully on the tray, wiped his hands on his apron, and stepped forward with the posture of someone who'd once argued before the state Supreme Court. "And one, my name is Raj D'Souza," he said calmly. "This is my home. May I ask the nature of the alleged violation?" Karen spoke up immediately. "They've been defying HOA fire codes by using an open flame on unapproved property, obstructing public spaces with illegal gatherings, and possibly," she lowered her voice dramatically, "possibly violating local residency laws. I mean, I don't want to assume, but we do have procedures for background checks." The younger officer's eyes flicked toward my mother, who stepped forward, with a tight smile that didn't hide the fire in her tone. "I'm Lena D'Souza," she said. "Born in New Jersey, law degree from NYU, property law specialist. You'll find no violations here today, just a family enjoying a private backyard under county-approved residential codes." Karen scoffed. "Oh please, they've been harassing me for weeks, disrupting the harmony of the neighborhood, flaunting their non-compliance like it's a game. I'm the president of this HOA, and I'm entitled to enforce policies passed by a board and voted on by residents," I interjected. "Which we now know, thanks to our records, hasn't happened in over 2 years. In fact, I pulled out my phone. We have documentation of you fabricating amendments, selectively enforcing outdated provisions, and issuing fines without cause. We also have video evidence of you trespassing, harassing our family, and tearing down our legal decor." I opened a shared folder labeled HOA Evidence D'Souza. It was neatly categorized: dates, violations, witnesses, videos, photos, audio clips. One officer leaned in, brows raised. Karen's face drained of color. "You've been recording me," she stammered. "We've been protecting ourselves," Arjun said, stepping up beside me. "Because every time we tried to comply, you moved the goalposts." The older officer tapped his notepad. "Do you have a copy of the HOA bylaws?" "Of course," my mom replied, annotated, highlighted, with timestamps and the last legal filing, which, by the way, expired last fiscal year. Karen took a step back, eyes darting as if trying to escape the gravity of the moment. "This is absurd. They're turning the neighborhood into a legal battlefield. They're asserting their rights," the younger officer said quietly. The older one nodded. "We won't be issuing any citations today. In fact, it might be best for both parties to file formal complaints through proper civil channels." Karen clenched her fists. "This isn't over." "No," Dad replied, his voice like a gavel. "But it's no longer being played by your rules." The officers left without incident. The cruisers turned the corner and disappeared. Karen stood alone at the edge of the driveway, no longer radiant with power, just a woman stripped of her illusion of control. We resumed our barbecue quietly, but with a new sense of resolve. That night, in our living room, we turned legal strategy into a family operation. Mom drafted I began building a case for targeted harassment. Arjun cross-checked HOA records with state housing laws. Even Grandma helped sort printed documents into labeled folders. Karen had crossed a line, and in doing so, she gave us a gift, undeniable proof that she viewed her role not as stewardship, but as domination. What she didn't realize was that she hadn't just escalated a neighborhood dispute. She'd declared legal war, and we were more than ready to fight it. Karen may have walked away from the police incident without handcuffs, but what she didn't realize was that she had already triggered a far more potent weapon, our collective legal minds. By Monday morning, our dining room had transformed into a war room. Laptops buzzed, coffee mugs crowded the table, and yellow legal pads filled with handwritten notes formed miniature towers beside stacks of HOA documentation. Mena had even skipped her law lecture at UCLA just to video in and help dissect the HOA's flawed framework. "This entire HOA is a house of cards," she said, scrolling through scanned bylaws on her screen. "Karen's been enforcing expired regulations and hasn't submitted the mandatory annual compliance forms in 3 years. She's a lawsuit waiting to happen. She thinks she's the law," I added, "but she's not even following the ones that exist." Mom finished editing the cease and desist letter and passed it across the table. "Here's our first move. We hit her with this. No more direct contact, no more citations. If she so much as steps onto our lawn again, we'll file for a restraining order." Dad nodded approvingly. "And while we're at it, I'm reaching out to the county board to report her for procedural misconduct. If she's been collecting fines and spending HOA money without a budget vote, that's not just unethical, it's criminal." But we knew this couldn't just be a private battle. Karen's reign was broader than our family. We'd spoken to neighbors, and what we found was a pattern of fear, compliance, and silence. "She fined the Jeffersons for painting their door navy blue," Arjun said, holding up a photo. "Claimed it was too aggressive of a color. She forced the Martinez kids to take down their basketball hoop," Mina added, then said it was because of noise pollution, even though they only played until 6 p.m. Everyone had a story, but no one had dared to fight until now, so we gave them a platform. That week we launched a private Facebook group titled Magnolia Crest Unmuted. Within 48 hours, It had 83 members, nearly every household in the neighborhood. We posted resources, explained tenant rights, broke down legalese into plain language, and encouraged residents to share their own HOA horror stories. One neighbor, a retired accountant named Mrs. Liu, messaged privately. She threatened to foreclose on me over a flower bed violation. I didn't even know she could do that. She couldn't, but Karen had always counted on fear and confusion to maintain her grip. That ended now. We called for a special HOA meeting as allowed under Section 6.4 of the bylaws, with the explicit goal of voting on Karen's removal. She tried to sabotage the effort, of course, emailing residents to claim the meeting was cancelled, forging digital notices, and even removing flyers from community boards. Too bad we'd already anticipated that we had timestamps, email headers, witness statements, and a signed petition with more than the required 2/3 of member signatures. Everything was by the book. Ironically, the same book Karen had never bothered to read. The meeting took place on a crisp Thursday evening in the clubhouse, the same space Karen had once used to bark orders and impose her will. This time, she stood at the podium defensively, clutching a binder of papers that rattled with her trembling hands. "You're making a mistake," she said, scanning the room with frantic eyes. "You think these people care about the rules? Without strong leadership, this neighborhood will fall into chaos." Dad stepped up. Next.com/measured. "Unshakable. Leadership is not tyranny," he said. "It's stewardship, and rules are not weapons, they're agreements. You've treated them like a private arsenal." I followed, presenting a slideshow of evidence: misused funds, forged citations, patterns of discrimination. Each slide landed like a hammer. By the end, no one spoke in her defense. We called a vote. Out of 92 members, 74 voted for her removal, only 4 abstained. The rest sided with us. Karen single quotes as face collapsed. She didn't shout, didn't cry, just quietly stepped down from the podium, clutching her binder like a lifeline as she exited the building and her position. In stunned silence, the HOA board was restructured that night. A temporary president was appointed and a full audit was scheduled, but we weren't celebrating yet. Not until the damage Karen had caused to finances, reputations, and community trust was fully repaired, and not until we addressed her parting shot. Because the next morning, an envelope appeared in our mailbox, certified from Karen's new attorney. She was suing us. The envelope was thick, heavier than necessary, as if Karen wanted the weight of her revenge to be felt before it was read. Dad opened it at the breakfast table, his coffee barely touched. "Civil suit," he murmured, flipping through the pages. "Defamation, emotional distress, harassment. She's claiming we orchestrated a character assassination campaign." Mom took the document and began skimming. "She's accusing us of targeting her with a coordinated smear operation. In her capacity as a volunteer community official, she was removed by vote," I said, incredulous. "We didn't smear anything. We exposed misconduct. And we documented everything," Arjun added. "She's walking straight into a legal buzzsaw." Still, none of us smiled. This wasn't some petty threat. Karen had retained a real law firm, one known for aggressive tactics. She was gambling big, hoping intimidation would succeed where manipulation failed. But this time, Karen wasn't dealing with frightened homeowners or overworked cops. She was dragging an entire family of legal professionals into a courtroom. Responded with surgical precision. Within days, we drafted a formal answer denying all claims, along with a motion to dismiss the case as frivolous. We attached evidence: the HOA bylaws, resident testimonies, and digital proof of Karen's misconduct, all time-stamped, authenticated, and admissible. Still, Karen pressed forward. She had money, pride, and a desperate need to reclaim control. But what she didn't have was a case. At the preliminary hearing, the courtroom was sparse. Karen sat beside her attorney, eyes sunken and darting. She wore a black blazer, conservative and severe, likely a costume meant to elicit sympathy. Her lawyer spoke first, claiming we'd humiliated her publicly, caused her social isolation, and interfered with her pursuit of community leadership. Then it was our turn. Dad opened with his calm, commanding tone. "Your Honor, this case isn't about defamation. It's about accountability." Ms. Witherspoon held power in a community and wielded it recklessly. When confronted with the consequences of her own actions, she sought to silence the people who stood up. I followed with evidence: screenshots of her forged emails, photos of illegally issued fines, videos of verbal harassment. Arjun entered HOA financial records showing misappropriated funds, including one absurd $600 expense labeled morale-enhancing office decor. Mena appeared via video call, outlining relevant housing laws Karen had violated with repeated impunity. Karen's attorney tried to pivot. "This is excessive. A simple disagreement doesn't justify this level of retaliation." "It wasn't a disagreement," Mom said. "It was a pattern. And in law, patterns matter." The judge listened quietly, sifting through the exhibits with increasing disapproval. After 2 hours, he looked up and leaned forward. "This court finds no credible evidence of defamation or harassment by the defendants. Rather, it appears the plaintiff misused her authority and now seeks to weaponize the court to shield herself from criticism." He paused, letting that sink in. "This case is dismissed with prejudice." Karen went rigid, lips parted, as if waiting for someone to object on her behalf. No one did, not even her lawyer. Furthermore, the judge added, I recommend that defendants consider pursuing recovery of legal fees should they choose. That was the moment it ended. Not with Karen shouting, or storming out, or threatening further retribution. Just silence. Just a woman who'd finally realized that her titles, her threats, and her control had all crumbled under the weight of her own arrogance. Outside the courthouse, we stood in the autumn sun, quiet for a moment. We didn't win, because we're lawyers, Dad finally said. We won because we didn't back down, I think, Mum added. She expected this to be a cautionary tale for us. Instead, she became one for everyone else. In the weeks that followed, the HOA transformed. New elections brought in balanced, thoughtful leadership. Bylaws were rewritten with input from every household. Fines were suspended, policies revised, and a long overdue apology issued to residents harmed under Karen's rule. As for Karen, she sold her home quietly and left Magnolia Crest without a goodbye. The house sat empty for a while, a cautionary monument to unchecked power, and we stayed, thrived. Arjun graduated law school, Mena passed the bar. Grandma's roses bloomed brighter than ever, untouched and unchallenged. And every time a new family moved in, we dropped off a welcome basket with lemonade, cookies, and a printed copy of The Community by Laws. Just in case. Because in this neighborhood, justice wasn't theoretical anymore, it was personal.